what's going on in the world today, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, Annie, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, and featuring Curtis C.S. Bennett and the most interesting guests that you'll find anywhere on Internet radio. So sit back, relax, and remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
All right, and welcome back to another adventure here on Southern Sense. You're listening live, watching live, up on my website, which is southernsense.net, as well as on YouTube, Facebook, and half a dozen other places. I don't even know where the heck we are anymore. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, and happy Thanksgiving to you all. And I'm with my courageous co-host going, where's she going with this today? Curtis C.S. Bennett.
Hey.
Good afternoon, Curtis.
Yeah, as we were talking.
Curtis, we lost your sound. We lost your sound again, darling.
What about
the last couple of seconds? Nope, still got no sound, Curtis. Check to make sure your plug didn't get loosened. But we've got ourselves a lot to talk about, a lot going on. Great guest. We got Matt Clark. He's got a great book out called The Founding Fathers, What Did They Really Say?, which is up on Amazon. He'll be joining us at the start of the show. And at the second half of the show, we have someone that hasn't been on for a while, Tom DeWeese, who is the founder of American Policy Center, that has been around since the 1980s, doing fantastic work and blowing the horn on the New World Agenda, Agenda 21, before anyone else was talking about it. Curtis, do we have sound with you yet? Nope, no sound yet, Curtis. No sound. Just try unplugging and plugging your headset back in. Try that. Wait a minute, you're muted on my end. Maybe that's what's... You got to unmute it on your end. If you can see the icon for unmuting yourself, the little microphone, click on it. There we go. Try now.
Yeah.
Nope,
that wasn't
I have
on
no
there.
sound still from you, Curtis. We're missing your sound. Well, folks, this is what live broadcasting is all about. You never know what's going to happen here. With that said, like I said, we have a lot to talk about, and Matt Clark will be joining us very shortly. But we start off each and every show with a dedication to a fallen hero or heroes. And since yesterday was Thanksgiving, a lot of people don't understand what the truth about Thanksgiving was. So today's show is dedicated to the 102 brave men, women, and children that came across on the Mayflower, and to the brave men of all classes, all religious beliefs, that signed the Mayflower Compact that gave birth to our Declaration of Independence and to our Constitution. Thanksgiving was formed on October 3rd of 1863 through a proclamation and prayer by President Abraham Lincoln. And he declared, the year that is drawing towards its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties, which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come, others have been added, which are of so extraordinary a nature that they cannot fail to penetrate and even soften the heart, which is habitually insensible to the ever-watchful providence of Almighty God. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to foreign states to invite and provoke their aggressions, peace has been preserved with all nations. Order has been maintained, the laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed everywhere, except in the theater of military conflict, while that theater has been greatly contracted by the advancing armies and navies of the Union. Needful diversions of wealth and of strength from the fields of peaceful industry to the national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. The axe has enlarged the borders of our settlements and mines, as well of iron and coal as of the precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. Population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege and the battlefield and the country. rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out of these great things. They are the precious gift of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, have nevertheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and one voice by the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning to foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise for our benefits, Father who dwelleth in the heavens. And I recommend to them that, while offering up the ascriptions justly due to him with such singular deliverances and blessings, they do also, with humble penitence for our national perseverance and disobedience, command to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife in which we are unavoidably engaged, and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation, and to restore it as soon as may be consistent with the divine purposes, to the full enjoyment of peace, harmony, tranquility, and union. And I say this prayer that he said in 1863 to show you whence he had these thoughts from our founders that came to this nation in 1620.
After 2 long months at sea, the Mayflower reaches Cape Cod with 102 people on board. Before they left their ship, the Pilgrims faced their first major challenge.
What happened is the Pilgrims arrived here at Cape Cod, but they weren't supposed to be here. They were trying to go to the Hudson River. So as a result, it was sort of the Wild West. They didn't have a set of laws that covered them when they were in this place that they weren't supposed to be. So they got together, and at first they couldn't agree. Some men thought we should go and start our own individual plantations. Some men thought we should keep trying to go to the Hudson River. Some men thought we should stay. So they came together and they decided on what goals they had in common. And that's when they created the Mayflower Compact. It starts with, "In the name of God, amen." And then it says, "We, the subjects of King James, of England and Scotland and Ireland and France, are here to plant a colony. So we are going to create laws under the English laws that are best for everyone in the colony." It was the first time people had to choose a government for themselves because they were sort of in a no man's land. And it was a great example of people who had a lot of different perspectives and goals coming together and achieving a really strong community.
The idea of the Mayflower Compact, of a community that's bound together by a vow, and that then remains after horrific deaths of the first winter. The Mayflower Compact was used to respond to crisis. When a community could have imploded, it bound all of the men of Mayflower together. There were 41 passengers that signed or made their mark upon the document. And the Mayflower Compact becomes a constitution for Plymouth Colony for 72 years.
10 years after Plymouth Colony is founded, a larger and more powerful settlement called Massachusetts Bay Colony began competing with Plymouth for dominance throughout New England.
William Bradford was the second governor of Plymouth Colony. Bradford begins writing a chronicle called Of Plymouth Plantation around the year 1630. What is happening is the realization of the growing power of Massachusetts Bay and the part of Massachusetts Bay to almost erase Plymouth's presence at the very beginnings of New England because they were separatists. And Massachusetts was Puritan and they derided the separatists. And you can see Bradford putting the flag in the ground and saying, "We were the first, we started this," and recognizing the importance of the Mayflower Compact as a constitutional act where Men gathered, created a form of self-government that they were aligning themselves with.
The lessons from the Mayflower Compact and of Plymouth Plantation are still relevant 400 years later.
I hope that visitors to Plymouth Plantation come away with an understanding that when the Pilgrims came to Plymouth, they were not all the same. They were very different, and they had to unite to create a community. And that was what was done in the Mayflower Compact.
What we can learn from the ancestors is their ability to listen, their ability to attempt to build consensus, their skill at coming to a decision and moving forward together. My name is Richard Pickering, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Plymouth Plantation. I play William Brewster in 17th century English Village. I just am so grateful that you all are with me.
My name is Vicki Oman, and I work at Plymouth Plantation. Most recently, I've been playing Bridget Fuller, and she is the wife of the deacon named Samuel Fuller. Thank you for visiting with me.
Not a problem.
The men and women that were aboard Mayflower represented a broad spectrum of religious life in England. There were Anglicans, there were Puritans, there were Separatists. They also came from 17 different regions in England.
The Pilgrims lived in England, and they had created a separate church. That's why we call them separatists nowadays. It was a church separate from the state church. Before the Pilgrims left for New England, they were living in Leiden in the Netherlands. So while they were in the Netherlands, there was religious freedom, so they were able to worship as they wished, but culturally they were uncomfortable and they were poor. So because they wanted their children to learn their religion and to be with English people, leaving Holland was a great idea for them. And coming here meant that they had an opportunity to own land as well as to have their own church.
In September 1620, the Mayflower set sail from England bound for North America.
The Mayflower voyage was horrific. Many of the passengers had never been to sea before. They're caught in transatlantic storms, and the ship is pounded by them.
One passenger and one sailor die on the voyage.
On the Mayflower, women were responsible for their own health and safety, but they were also responsible for the health and safety of their families. There are women who were very pregnant on the Mayflower. The woman who gave birth on the Mayflower was named Elizabeth Hopkins, and they decided to name that boy Oceanus because he was born in the middle of the ocean.
In November 1620, the Mayflower arrives in Cape Cod after 2 long months at sea.
The first winter in Plymouth can only be described as a nightmare.
People were getting very sick. There was a point that they say that everybody was sick except for a couple of the leaders, like William Brewster, who was taking care of people just like a mom would.
What was it like to arrive 102 passengers and 2.5 months later, you're barely 50? At the worst, there were only 5 to 7 who were well enough to take care of the sick and bury the dead.
Oh, with confession enter ye.
Something that holds the Mayflower passengers together is beyond our imagining. And so I think in that caring and in that suffering, what they began to see was a humanity that surpassed religious difference, that surpassed regional difference, and they stood together. And I think in some ways, the success of Plymouth Colony is based on the common suffering.
The strong bonds of the Mayflower passengers helped Plymouth Colony thrive, and their legacy lives on 400 years later.
I am a descendant of 6 Mayflower families, including William Brewster, Thomas Rogers, Stephen Hopkins, John Howland, and Richard Warren. According to the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, Today, there are roughly 25 to 32 million Mayflower descendants in the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Netherlands, and Australia.
The story of the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag, of those people who came together here in New England in the 1600s, it's not just a story for Mayflower descendants, it's a story for everyone. My family is from Sweden, my family isn't even from England, but I know that that story is an American story, and I'm an American.
All right, and we are back. For some reason, oh, there we go. I'm having a little problem with my headset and everything. Usually it's you, Curtis, that has the problem with the headset. Now today it's me.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
All
Matter of
right.
fact, I had lost complete hearing. The headset just completely got disconnected. God bless Bluetooth. Anyway, we're back. You're listening to Southern Sense or watching Southern Sense live on our webpage, which is southernsense.net, as well as up on YouTube, Facebook, and half a dozen other places I don't even know anymore. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, along with my co-host Curtis C.S. Bennett. Curtis, we got ourselves a great guest today, and I know he has to leave early, so we popped in early. Want to welcome to the show Matt Clark, and his book. He's got a new book that's coming out it came out in September actually, called "The Founding Fathers: What Did They Really Say? Evidence that the U.S. was founded on God and Christian principles." Welcome, Matt. How are you today?
Thank
Hey,
you.
Matt.
Hey, how are you both doing today?
All right.
It's good to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, it is our pleasure. Our pleasure. You wrote this book that actually you compiled, I should say, to say it correctly, is all the founding documents. What I didn't find, though, I would have probably gone back to sections of the Bible, Plato's Republic, to the codifying of English common law by King Harold, the Magna Carta, all these things that brought us up to the moment that gave us the Mayflower Compact, and then leading in to the foundation of these United States. But you bring it from that point forward, which is great because it's not being taught in school.
Oh, no.
And that's what you aimed this book at.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You aimed this book at those kids that are not learning this in school.
Yes, I did. I put it together for the kids and for young adults and even older adults. You know, what little bit that they ever did touch on in schools, they never went into depth about it, at least not during the 20th century and up until now. In the mid to late 19th century, there was kind of a turn away from teaching a lot of this in the schools. They started adopting more and more of the not agnostic, but they tended to just not to recognize God as much as they used to, as they did in the early years of this country. Up until around the 1830s or so, it was very common that in the schools that the founding of this nation was taught this way, with references to God and with the documents. And they just kind of slowly have moved away from that up until, in 1962 or 63, that they finally got God removed from the schools entirely. So I put this together because there's a lot of people don't know. There's a lot that I even learned. And I've been raised on this kind of history as from a small child on up. The bicentennial. I was there I remember it. I was only about 5 or 6 years old, but there was this huge buildup of pride in the nation and our founding roots and how far we had come up to that point. And they, at least the part of the country that I lived in, they gave God the credit for that, for guiding the nation. So I went back and I put this book together. It took me about 2 years or so to get everything collected that I wanted to use. And then it took maybe about another 6 to 8 months of going through that and re-verifying over and over and over again the accuracy of the material that I had. And then it took me about a year to put it together in a way that made sense. This book that you have is actually the 5th edition. I've made changes even along the way since I very first put it out around this time of the year in 2017. So this is the 5th edition of it, and I added a lot more material in it that I left out of the previous editions, simply because it needed to be in here, because it's just forgotten. It's forgotten material, and we need this. We need to know this material. We need to know what it is, or who wrote it, and where it came from, and why they put it in there that way.
Well, having been someone that lived the bicentennial, a little bit older than you are, somewhat. Matter of fact, the first president I voted for was not Jimmy Carter. It was Ronald Reagan. Having owned a business under Jimmy Carter, I know. But the Department of Education, which Jimmy Carter created back in 1979, took education away from the states and federalized it. And it was just prior to that I saw the change in education, and it crept in slowly. As a matter of fact, our next guest after you is Tom DeWeese with the American Policy Center. So the two of you kind of like piggyback on each other very much, because you both are in the same direction. What I saw in the 60s was when they began to put in health education, mandating that. And as a kid, I just saw there was a problem with that. They opened the door to what we have now, where they openly teach transgenderism to 4 and 5-year-olds. I saw it back then as a kid. They were calling it health ed. And they said, oh, well, we're going to teach them about certain diseases and so forth, and let them know what their body parts are for. And it was an opening. It was like the light was going on in my head as a kid. And I saw the way it was coming. And I'm glad to see that there are people like you and like Tom out there still fighting to bring us back to our founding principles. And that's one of the reasons why I chose, instead of taking a fallen hero like I normally do, which would be someone, a first responder or military or extraordinary American citizen, I chose to go back to one of our founding documents, the Mayflower Compact. It was the first time in our history that everyday men, people that were indentured servants, had the same voice as someone that was a lord of a manor. And it was the first time we saw people being treated as equal, not by social rank or by race or religion, but everyone held an equal voice. It was the first time we ever saw that in history. It was the start of the great experiment we call these United States, which is why I found your book very fascinating, that the documents you compiled are some that I had never seen or heard about. I've never read the Confederation of States. And in there, I found that you mentioned Article 11 in the Confederation of States. Now, what was interesting, which explained to me why during the Revolutionary War, American troops went into Canada, because the Confederation of States recognized Canada as part of our land.
Yeah, they did. Absolutely. Yeah, we fought for that land during the Revolutionary War and so forth, because they saw that as their land. It was part of their economy. I mean, that was what was helping drive their economy too. Without those waterways and the trading posts and such, it would have greatly reduced their economy.
Well, everyone turns around and they say, well, the founding fathers, there were slaveholders, there were deists, but that's not exactly true. They're completely misunderstood.
Absolutely.
You had two people that I did some research on when I was in school, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They were best of friends up until one point, and they constantly wrote letters back and forth to each other. Matter of fact, they both died on July 4th, hours apart from each other on the same day.
Yeah.
But here was one that was a slaveholder, a Southerner, and here was a Northerner that defended British troops in the massacre, the Boston Massacre.
Yeah.
And yet people didn't understand who they were or why they did what they did.
Yeah. No, a lot of people do. And unfortunately, and there's very well-known encyclopedias out there that print these articles where they call them deist without even defining what a deist is. So, I don't know if I can say the name or not, but Encyclopedia Britannica, they're
Wikipedia.
they're very, 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 they're very bad about painting them as being deistic, and they weren't. Neither one of them were. Now, Thomas Jefferson is a little bit more of a person that's hard to pin down exactly what his thoughts are, because he kept those mainly to himself. There's very few people that he shared his personal feelings about the scriptures and about God and about Jesus. He kept a lot of that to himself, and he felt that everybody, had a right to have their own personal beliefs. If they believed a little bit differently than him, or him different than they do, that was a personal right. That was a personal choice. But he did, he did in a letter to Mr. Thompson say that he says, I am a Christian. Or yes, he says, I am a Christian. He said, but not in the manner, I'm paraphrasing, not in the manner that the deists would think so. They would consider me basically to be the opposite of them. He said, I believe in the scriptures as it was written, not as another person tells me that they understand it to be written. And he did not accept these superstitious beliefs, the paganism. He did not accept the deistic thought, because he even expresses that. It's in my book as well, a Thanksgiving proclamation of his own during the time of war, where multiple times throughout that entire document, he calls upon those who wish to gather together to pray for God's help during their struggle for independence, that they turn to God for his help and be thankful to God for all that he has been doing for them, and that he guide them in winning their freedom from an oppressive king. And a deist would not say that. A deist would not say that. No. Because as you know, a deist doesn't believe that God intervenes in human events. And I can't find any of the primary founders, and even the ones that are still signers of the documents, such as the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, I can't find ones that make any sort of a claim to be a deist. People always bring up Ethan Allen. Well, he had nothing to do with any of these documents. He was a warrior in the army. He led soldiers. People, they're doing everything that they can to minimize God's role in this nation and completely take him out of it as well, wherever they can.
Well, but we were founded upon Judeo-Christian beliefs, plain and simple.
Right.
And even in the Mayflower Compact, they recognized God as supreme, that gave us these rights. And the reason why I bring up the Bible, because in the Bible, it tells us directly that God has given us free will.
Yes.
Free will to choose and think on our own. And it's up to that free will to decide who will rule over us, which our founders recognized. And if it wasn't for the uprisings in England, we would have never come this far. And that's why I always hearken all the way back to King Harold and his codifying of English common law that recognized, first and above all, the right to an individual to own property and to defend themselves.
Right.
Which people don't recognize. People don't realize that. But we're seeing ourselves today, seeing these rights being eroded by people that have never read these documents, have never taught them, do not want them taught. So unless we know what our founders intended for us, how can we defend them?
Correct.
Which is why your book is so important.
Well, if I can just kind of build upon that, initially I had wanted to include documents such as you're talking about. I tested this material out on the people that I knew would hate it. Well, you know the saying, if you're drawing flack, you know you're over your target. So what it came down to is that every time I would bring Mayflower Compact, things like that up, well, that was England. That's not here. They'd always had this sort of kickback on it where they would, so I could not mention, I learned that I could not mention any Bible scriptures, and I couldn't mention any documents prior to 1770, 1775. So when I started putting all this together, I had already learned my lesson there that if I wanted anybody to accept the documentation, I was going to have to leave that out, even though it was a critical part of leading up to that point, as you were saying, just simply so that perhaps people be more receptive to it, because I'm using the actual documents. And from that point, that's another objective of this book, is for people to take these documents for themselves and study it on their own, and they can go backward, as you did, in studying it, and they can also move forward in history. And hopefully they would see the change in the nation, where they started moving further and further away from the truth here, and basically just turning it all into a lie, revisionist history.
There are some states, such as the one I'm living in, that are mandating that founding documents, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, are taught. I'd like to see that movement go nationwide, and your book is a great start to that. This should be a textbook. This should be a textbook, honestly.
Honestly, there's some people that I know that do homeschooling that they use this book for their children.
Start. That's a start.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've written a couple of books about American history that they don't teach no more in the schools, and I was just wondering, at what point in your life that you weren't satisfied with the history you were being taught, that drove you to do some research, or did it just drop in your lap one day, some information that, hey, I didn't know this, let me look into this a little more?
Yeah, I would say that's probably about maybe 17, 18 years ago. I would get in discussions with people online, and we would talk about different things, politics and the country and where it came from, where it's headed. And I started seeing, at that point, I had been married, 12 years or so, raising kids, or AK, we had one son, working, building a career. I was kind of out of the loop for a long time with things. But I'd say around 2007 or so is when I really started seeing that the kids that had grown up to that point and now were adults in their early mid 20s, because I was in my late 30s, they didn't know this. And they didn't, when I tell them, no, look at this document here, I don't believe that. Where'd you find something like that? Well, I found it at the National Archives. I said, they have all these documents. You can go online and get them yourself. I didn't do anything here that nobody else can do on their own, honestly. It just takes digging. and then you got to put the pieces together. But yeah, I would say it was around 2007 or so. I really started seeing that the kids that had been graduating from high school and going to college and so forth they were not being taught. They just were not being taught the truth. It was all they avoided this stuff in the classrooms. They did not want this. They were taking all this out. And I feel that it needs to be brought back. It needs to be taught. It needs to be remembered. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in God or anything. It's the truth, and it needs to be taught. And it's not about forcing anybody to believe in God either. See, that's the whole point, as you were talking a few minutes ago, Ann, that you have free will, and you have free will in this country. You don't have to believe in God. And my book in no way, supports any sort of a force education, acceptance of God, or any of that. That's not what this is about at all. This is about all the information, all the documents that proves our founding principles, which were on Judeo-Christian beliefs.
Well, one of the things that people don't understand is that, there is man, and then there's a higher power. Now, that higher power can either be tyranny or your belief in God. And that's what makes the United States so unique, is that even though we may have a president, he is no higher than you and I are.
No, they're not supposed to be, no.
No, but what we are allowing to happen, and we are allowing it by not knowing this information here, by not spreading it, by not preaching the word, if you want to put it that way, that no one is greater than anyone else. You may have more talents in certain areas than I have, and I may have more talents in other areas that you don't have. Sure. But that doesn't make one of us better than the other. No. It doesn't even, how much money you have does not make you better than I am. We're supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law. Right. And yet we have individuals that fail to see that. They have to be better. They have to command power.
Right.
But this is what our Constitution does. It should contain those individuals and protect us from their tyranny. And yet we have allowed people to obtain power. We have actually given it to them.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my favorite part. Here we go. The preamble to the Declaration of Independence, which as my husband calls him Bubblehead, our current president, or as I call him, Creepy Uncle Joe.
Yeah, me too.
But people don't even understand the preamble and the intent of it. It sets the stage for saying why we have the right to take power back to ourselves.
Yes.
When Jefferson so cleverly wrote, and this is the adopted version, where he wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men," and when he says men, he doesn't mean just male, female. He means all of creation.
Yes.
The proper proper noun to include all of humankind was to say men, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator, not by a tyrant, with certain unalienable rights. Now, in the original, he wrote undeniable, but unalienable is a much more powerful word.
Yes.
That these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
Not the guarantee of happiness, which a lot of people, no, they want an equal outcome to a foot race or a baseball game. No, you have the right to pursue it.
Right.
You're not guaranteed it, but you can pursue it, which in Europe, you weren't allowed to pursue whatever your dream and goal was. You were told you're the son of a shoemaker, so you are a shoemaker.
Right.
This is where we are different. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, not by tyranny, not by those who are in power, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government, from you and me. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Yes.
And prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. You can't change your government like you change a pair of shoes, in other words.
Right. Right.
And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right them themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. And yeah, we're the frog in the pot on the stove that's being heated up.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to feel the heat until it's too late.
Just too late. Absolutely. And that's where we're at.
And this is where it's people like you, Curtis, myself, and our next guest coming up shortly, Tom DeWeese, are doing. We're ringing that bell. We're saying the water's getting a little too hot here, guys. It's time to jump out.
Right.
All right.
Well, Annie, I would say one of the reasons why we are on the path that we are today, as far as the Constitution, is the way that our first president handled the presidency. Remember, they came to him about a title. What shall we call you? You know, your highness or whatever. And thinking of the freedom of people and not being under any, you know, authority figure, he said, Mr. President, that's fine with me. And not only that, they wanted him to be president for life. He refused to.
Yeah.
And he really didn't want to be president a second term, but he got it. Matter of fact, he's the only president that was unanimously, you know, voted in. But he set the tone to keep us away from, you know, people, you know, who live under dictators and other authority figures. And I think he doesn't get enough credit, George Washington.
Well, we're going to bring into this conversation our other guest, Tom DeWeese, who's shown up early. He's the president of the American Policy Center that people can find at americanpolicy.org. Tom, we have Matt Clark, who wrote a very interesting book, as I pull it forward, which is The Founding Fathers, What Did They Really Say? And Matt, you said this is edition number 5 that has all the founding documents going from the 1780s forward that gave us our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, and gave us this nation that our founders did. It's very good because these are the things that are not being taught in school anymore. And these are things that you're crying about. We're all crying about. So welcome, Tom. How are you today?
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Ann, it's good to be with you all. And we're doing pretty well. I'm looking forward to a very busy year coming up.
Oh, that it is. And Matt was talking how we were founded as a Judeo-Christian nation and that God was in all these documents and that were put forth before us. And it's really interesting that the Democratic platform over the last several conventions had no mention of God in it. And the current Republican platform had it toned down somewhat. So they're trying to take God away from us.
There's been an assault on Christianity, particularly for at least I know of about 30 years. And the environmental movement that keeps talking about Mother Earth, but leaving God out of it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is, you know, they actually had a movement where they were taking priests and ministers throughout Christianity and getting them involved in the environmental movement, and next thing you knew, your preacher was standing up there in the front of the congregation, and he's giving pure paganism, talking about saving the earth, and you know, leaving God out of it completely. And I've seen this going on since the 1970s that they've been doing that, and you know, we're seeing some of the results of that now. We have leaders into Christianity who don't even know really how to divide that and what Christianity is versus radical environmentalism.
Well, Matt, you want to chime in?
Well, no, I agree. I agree with him. That's exactly what's happening. You know, you can even go to the Word of God. God tells people how to treat the land, and if you follow God's rules, God's laws on how you handle your land and your animals, you're always going to be prosperous. You're always going to be producing. You're always going to be doing well. So yeah, no, it's caught up in this whole, and I'm sure no one here disagrees that we have to protect our environment. We have to protect our clean water, all that, and we can do that without having to give it over to this radical, environmental groups that are out there who won't even the leadership won't even be living by those rules that they're making.
Now, I want to change a little bit here because what's going on today has a lot to do with not following our Constitution and the founding principles. And Matt, you reposted an article questioning whether or not we are now actually into a new World War III. And this is something I screamed about last week when Biden turned around on last Tuesday and told Ukraine it's okay to use U.S. missiles and fly them into Russia and hit targets in Russia. And I'm going, are you crazy? He just declared war without the consent of Congress. When Putin, the Saturday before, said, if you do that, we will recognize it as an act of war. So Biden turns around and goes ahead and does it, just basically unilaterally declared war unconstitutionally. Am I looking this correct or not, Matt?
No, you're absolutely right. By him doing that, he's basically saying, the United States is going to war with Russia through Ukraine. That's how I see it. I mean, we're basically side by side with Ukraine, bombing Russia. Am I misunderstanding it? That's my understanding of how that's viewed by someone such as Putin. Is it's literally an act of war. You're using somebody else to declare war on us.
Well, as I understand these weapons, Tom, they need American personnel to actually fire these missiles. So they actually, by Biden doing that, he has placed American personnel into a war zone and told them to act unilaterally as an agent of the United States. Then is that not correct?
Well, I've heard that as well. American troops have to be the ones that fire these things. If that's true, then absolutely that's what's happening. And you're absolutely right. Congress didn't declare this, and he just goes in there and namby-pamby puts this stuff together. So yeah, it's a very, very, very dangerous situation. I believe at this moment the reason we haven't seen all-out war break out is because Putin is probably waiting for Trump to get in there and hoping that there'll be some kind of a solution at that point that makes some sense and can bring an end to all this stuff. I don't know.
No, I think that as well. He's waiting for Trump. If Biden had been reelected or if Kamala had been elected, I think we'd be looking at a totally different game starting in 2025. But I hear that Putin has North Korean troops in Russia, and they're sending them to fight in Ukraine.
Yeah, 200,000 troops. And to compound it, he sent in these personnel mines, anti-personnel mines, not mines that go against armored tanks, not anti-tank mines, but anti-personnel mines, which is illegal in 130 other countries. So he's doubled down, not on just the missiles, but putting these landmines in there that could be used inside the Russia. So he's not only just declared war, but he's doubled down on it. And guys, the article you posted that shows that even Europe, Germany, and others are gearing up as if they will be the next target.
Yes, they are. They are.
I would. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Curtis. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even though I know Russia is a major adversary of ours, I believe a long time ago Congress has abdicated its power and authority to declare war. I mean, since World War II, going back to the Korean War and the Vietnam War, they never declared war. They just nowadays just call things conflict. And I don't know what age Uncle Joe was thinking of, but he probably thought he was like, way back in the 60s where he could just look at this as a conflict and say, yeah, go ahead and shoot some missiles into Russia. I don't think that's the greatest thing to do. But then again, LBJ, he lobbed a bunch of artillery into Laos, when we were fighting in Vietnam. And yet Congress never, declared war. So I think they have some culpability in the way things are thought these days when it comes to warfare.
Well, Matt, I know that you have to get off and run early because I'm watching the clock for you.
I've got about 20 minutes left, I think.
All right. Well, I want to bring Tom into this because, Tom, you had a book that came out last year called Sustainable: The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. It's one of 5 books, if we go back to the 20 or 30 years you've been writing. But it falls right into everything that we're talking about, because you had a recent posting about saying that you need to pay attention to local politics because the World Economic Forum recently had a meeting about Urban Transformation Summit, which was in San Francisco. They had one, I think it was in Tennessee the year before, where they're aiming at local communities, because people like you and I are waking up about our federal government, but we're not paying attention to what they're doing locally, and what happens locally morphs upward.
Yeah, well, for many years, the radical left, particularly through the environmental movement, has been saying, think globally, act locally. And a lot of these policies that are being put in place are coming at the local level. And we are learning that, well, first of all, you mentioned this World Economic Forum meeting in October. I believe they already knew that Trump was going to win this thing, and they knew they were going to have some problems at the top in the federal level. And now, so they were working on really reorganizing at the local level, getting through county commissioners, city councilmen, putting these policies in place. And this is what I've been fighting for several years now. You get local elected officials who literally know nothing about these plans. Every time one of my supporters would go in, or local activists would go in and start talking about the global agenda, or for heaven's sakes, would mention Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030. I've often joked, if there was a trap door standing underneath them at that little podium where they get those 3 minutes to talk, they'd disappear. Boom, gone. What a lot of people don't understand at the local level, you've got in this world about 20,000 non-governmental organizations. They are all pushing this agenda. Some of them are experts at specific issues. Some of them are just, doing it all in general. You've got the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, and then groups like this. I've also got Planned Parenthood, many, many others. But you've got the leaders of all this is the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and of course the United Nations. And they are training these local activists, or these NGOs, to come into the local community. They're standing there surrounding your elected officials, they'll say to them, here, we've got sample legislation, we got it all right here in a box, and we got the money for it too. The money are the federal grants. That is how they're spreading the poison, putting all this in place. The grants come, maybe the community has asked for a grant from one of the federal agencies to, for example, fix infrastructure under Main Street, where you've got wires and pipes that are 100 years old. And that's a legitimate thing for the city council to be looking at. But they take the grant, and all of a sudden they find out, this is an example from my hometown in Ohio. They have a square around the center of town, or the courthouse there, a square going around it. They asked for a grant for that very thing, for fixing infrastructure. They took a grant from the EPA. The EPA said, well, you're going to have to eliminate all of your traffic lights around that square and put in a roundabout on all 4 corners of the square. And this is the kind of thing where they push this agenda further. They may start telling you how much energy you can use. They may start talking about what kind of building materials that you can use, on and on and on. This is how they're promoting this. Well, what we have found out is in talking with some elected officials, so state legislators as well as county supervisors. You have, for example, in Minnesota, in South Dakota, some other places, they're putting in, the solar farms, and they're using eminent domain to come in and take this property. And there are public meetings where 200 people are showing up opposed to these plans. And one of my activists in Minnesota asked elected officials that he's been dealing with, who represents the property owners who are opposed to this? Who represents them? And they'll look at him and say, what do you mean? I don't know what you're getting at. And then he tries to explain to them that here they are fighting for their land, trying to protect their property, their farm. And they're being told, well, you have to go to the Public Utilities Commission. These are appointed boards that were created by politicians to be their workforce. And all of a sudden, the politicians are saying, well, there's nothing I can do about it. The Public Utilities Commission says we have to do this. Wait a minute. Who's the boss here? Who was elected by the people to represent the people? And they're standing there as we're asking these very pointed questions. And they're going, what do you mean? This is what we're up against. And so what I'm working on is to get local activists to understand the issue, to understand the forces that they're up against, and to begin to expose these elected officials who literally don't understand the very position that they were elected to and what their job was to be. And it's a big job, but that's where we're working on it.
Well, you're doing freedom pods. Now, I do believe you did come to one of my Tea Party meetings, because you were right there at the start of the Tea Parties, along with the rest of us. We started ours in March of 2009. I still run it today. Wonderful. And I'm happy to say that when county council sees me sitting here, you hear an exhaustive, oh, yeah. And you see that they're like, okay, now what? And this past election, I defeated a $950 million transportation sales tax full of all those little bells and whistles you were just talking about. So yeah, we know all about the infrastructure and stuff. And this is not the first time I did it to them. This is now the second time I've done it to them in a period of 3 years.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
I'm hearing one of the things I run into is a lot of local activists get intimidated by these huge organizations. There's nothing we can do. We can't stop them. I've had them say to me, well, we had 100 people show up at city council. And I go, great. What happened? Well, nothing. They wouldn't listen to us. And I ask them the question, what did you do the next day? Well, nothing, because it didn't work. And this is the problem we have. When our side loses a fight, we go, well, that's it. What's nothing we can do. When they lose a fight, they say that'll never happen again. And they, dig in deeper and make sure it doesn't. We have got to begin to fight at that level. It's our entire lives. You're talking about the Constitution as I came on and so forth, and the founding fathers and what they meant. And if we sit there and just say, well, there's nothing we can do, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're right. No. You're gone.
No, but this is where Matt's book is really important too, as well as your books, all 5 of them that people can get at AmericanPolicy.org under books, all up on Amazon, both of you. The founding fathers came from all walks of life. And there were doctors, lawyers, farmers, shopkeepers. They didn't matter. The same thing with the Mayflower Compact. They came from all different walks of life, different religious beliefs. And yet they united as one. And they knew they had one common enemy. That was the tyranny of Great Britain. We now have our common enemy is the tyranny of our local county, city, council, whatever you want to call it, and up the government chain. Those are our enemies unless we hold their feet to the fire and hold them to adhere to the Constitution, which is what you're fighting for and what Matt is fighting for also, and what I fight for here locally. And you can't let up. And I have a favorite saying, listen, if we have a common fight, and for this instance was the sales tax, I don't care I may not agree with your group 100%. There's maybe certain things I hate about your group, but we have a common fight. We unite on this one. You leave your ego at the door. The goal is the important thing.
That is a very important point, because one of the biggest problems that I've run into 50 years of working, in the conservative movement, is that there are those who look at somebody who may be compadres on one particular issue, but they're not on all of them. And you will have some people say, that person's not pure. I can't work with them. And there it goes. And if somebody is agreeing with you on a particular issue, work with them. Maybe if you talk with them enough, you'll be able to convince them to other things as well. But to just walk away and leave it, and that's why we have so many little pieces and parts to the movement that aren't organized together. And we're suffering for it because we don't have a united front when it comes to the main issues: private property protection, free enterprise, individual liberty. Those are the three pillars of freedom. And, we have to work together to support those, even if somebody over here said this about that particular issue and I disagree with them on that, so I'm not going to work with them. Then we're done. That's what's happening to us.
Yeah, if that happened back when the Pilgrims climbed aboard the Mayflower, we would not have had the most important founding document that brought us the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, the Mayflower Compact. And as Matt and I were talking, it was the first time that people from, of course, a broad spectrum were seen as equals. No matter who you were, you each had a singular voice, that you signed that compact and created a united voice. For one reason, you had one common enemy: tyranny. And this is what we have to fight. And that's why Matt's book is important, what your American Policy Center is so important, and why shows like this are important, that we find a united voice. You may not like everything I say, but do we have a common goal? And that's what we have to aim for. My head is right now exploding about
Well, I just wanted to ask both of our guests, do you think the climate is changed or going to change because of Trump's return to the swamp?
You mean the climate of politics?
Well, as you were saying, people need to stand up and fight for what they believe in and don't give up because they run into a barrier. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think we're different?
I'll tell you what, at the time of the election, it seemed like this huge coming together of the entire party, plus bringing others in who'd never been there before and everything. It's a very exciting moment. But now, as he is picking his team, I am seeing that, that person's not good enough. Oh no, that one's bad. Oh, why did he pick this person? Picking away. I do have some people that he's picking that I really don't care too much for, but I'm kind of seeing little splinters kind of break out there, and that concerns me.
Matt?
Yeah. As for myself, do I think that his policies are going to hurt the climate? No, I don't. I think the change that you're going to start seeing, at least I hope we do, is you're going to see the network of all the big money is probably going to not be so prevalent as it has been under Biden. There's a lot of private and corporate money that is funding all these think tanks and all of these lectures and these speakers who travel around the world and preach this climate change thing of theirs. It's the same old saying, in my opinion. You follow the money, and they're all getting funded by all these corporations that are Chinese corporations. China has got such a big hold on all of this technology, and Biden is one of the ones who gave it to them. But that money is being funneled out from research that I've done. It's being funneled out through all these agencies and through these different think tanks and organizations. And these people are being funded to travel the world and write these articles and deliver these lectures. And they're doing it on the authority of their education even more than experience. I've looked at some of the people, their experience, they're fairly new to this climate change. You know, they come from somewhere else, but they've been brought in as, I don't know, maybe as a friend of a friend of a friend. You know, it's a favor that they were given this position. I don't know, but no, I don't think that Trump is going to harm the climate.
Well, yeah, I've got a question here, because this last election, we saw the birth of all the PACs. I mean, we've seen them in the past, but with the Supreme Court ruling that, hey, listen, this is how you can do it, these PACs have grown. So you have one that's on the top, and then they splinter down. The next thing you know, it's an umbrella for, say, several hundred different PACs, all different types of names, and you have no idea that they're all under one umbrella. Will we see legislation coming out to limit the PACs, how many they can splinter into, and how much money they can throw into campaigns? Tom?
I doubt that we're going to see legislation concerning that, because they're going to start yelling, well, that's freedom of speech, and we can, take any position we want on things. So I haven't heard anything about doing that sort of thing, but you're right about the splintering of them. And as I said, you got the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the UN, and they break down from that. Those are the three main ones that we have to look at. And one of the things we should be working as hard as we can on is working to get the United States out of the United Nations. It would totally disintegrate if we did that. And then the World Economic Forum, we've got to expose them for what they are. And I think they have been hurt. They do know that they've got to arrange what they're doing, how they're coming at it. That's why this Urban Transformation Summit that they had was beginning to prepare for that. Again, they keep talking about this is only local. It's just a local plan. And yet, if you look at the plans that they're putting in place, these comprehensive plans in every community, we never had comprehensive plans before all of this started. But they say this is how we're going to organize for the future, because we got to make sure we have a good plan to how our community is going to look in 2040 and that sort of thing. And if you start looking at those comprehensive plans that they say are all local, you see the exact same language, whether it's in your town, the towns across the country, or Dubai or Jamaica or anything. They're all exactly the same language. This is a drive for global governance, and to completely change our entire system of government, to change our way of life. And you wonder, as we can look at the environmental issues and see that man-made climate change does not happen. It's not happening, with the exception of some of the things they're doing with their environmental programs, like, for example, covering the entire Earth with plastic shields for solar panels that are actually creating warming. These kind of things are destroying the environment, if anything else will, but not normal process of what people are doing. But why do they continue to push the environment as the center of everything? It's because the environment does not recognize political boundaries. So when you're talking about your national sovereignty, you're talking about your state sovereignty, you're talking about your county, your city, or your backyard, the environment goes through that without questioning it, and they are using that as the tool to completely change our system of government and our way of life, all under the threat of environmental Armageddon. So,
don't get me started on solar panels. Just don't. No, I saw a gorgeous cornfield right off of, not too far from I-95, turned into a solar farm. And then everyone around the area complained about, the storms were heavier around the solar farm. Yes, because it becomes a vortex, a weather vortex. And what happens when those solar panels are damaged in a storm? Oh, heaven forbid, that's hazardous waste. It contains things such as arsenic and other heavy metals that you can't take to the dump. And if you try to recycle them, it's not worth it recycling them. get nothing back out of it.
And then recycle them.
And then just start on the wind turbines. Oh, good Lord. We can go on for an entire 3 hours about the idiocy. And you were on a show last year, and I caught it. I think it was out of Montana, where the amount of energy, and matter of fact, Gregory Wrightstone is a friend of mine, the amount of energy that you can create from solar panels and wind farms is something like only 20% of what we actually need.
Actually, the figures that I've been seeing is closer to 6 to 10%. And they basically don't even recreate the energy that took to make them. And one of the most ridiculous things that I saw, one of the things they worry about in the wintertime in the areas where they have snow is when the panels get covered with snow. So they come up with this idea to put this little heater on each panel, and it's going to be fed by the energy created by that solar panel. Well, actually, to run that heater takes all the energy that solar panel creates. It is absolutely worthless. It creates nothing. And when you see these photographs of these miles and miles of nothing but solar panels out there, and that creates and that changes the atmosphere over that area. And it's actually, that's what creates warming. It also will help create tornadoes, things like that. And you're already seeing across the country, people talk this year about the weird weather that we've had on different kinds of storms and stuff. One of the reasons is because we are covered more and more and more with these things. And then you get into the wind towers, and they want to put those out over the ocean. And what happens when the hurricane comes rolling in and it's floating on its own little boat there on this thing? These things sometimes are 3 football fields long, up there. And they, this is disaster that they're creating. And meanwhile, you've got states and other entities that are eliminating their traditional power sources to make way for wind and solar. And we are going to end up with a massive shortage of power. We used to joke, the environmentalists wanted us all to go back to the caves. And we meant it as a joke, but we're going in that direction.
Well, maybe moving forward, we will truly be able to follow the science and do a lot better job than they did with COVID, as far as following the science.
Oh, yeah. We know how well that worked out, don't we? But the worst part is that when we do go into an energy shortage, it's not just an inconvenience. It will cost lives. I mean, we are an electronical society. It's not a matter of being inconvenienced because now your cell phone doesn't work or you can't get online. It will cost lives because people that have air tanks need to keep medication refrigerated, things like that. Mm-hmm. And if food is not properly refrigerated, it will cause illnesses. Hospitals will not be able to function. We already know now that they have a shortage of IV fluid because of the storms knocking out one of the manufacturing plants. We get into a tariff war with China. What's going to happen now with cost of medications when somewhere close to 90% of our medications is being manufactured in China? When did we move all of that overseas? When did we stop being self-reliant and reliant on the global economy?
Yeah.
Oh, gee, I just answered my own question. Global economy.
That's right.
Yeah, they're going to have to move back that manufacturing back to the United States. We have to be able to supply ourselves.
And it's the rules and the regulations that they've put on United States manufacturing, which is why it moved out like that. You got taxes, you've got regulations, and it was cheaper to go to these countries. And here you've got China sitting there sucking all of that up, where they're getting, wealthy off of it, and they're controlling our economy. And the whole wind and solar, particularly the solar industry, is controlled by the Chinese. And all the pieces and parts of it, and the electric cars, all of that kind of stuff. And what's just incredible about this is as they're doing all this to our electrical power, whether we're cutting it down to where we, won't have any. They're moving everything to electrical. It's
you just can't make some of this stuff up.
I know. I mean, it's just amazing. But one of the things that is very interesting, you're seeing that map of the election where they're really showing in reality. I mean, 90% of the United States is red, and then you've got, just in the big cities, you've got the blue. What is the policy behind these environmental programs? Smart growth, getting people out of the rural areas and into the cities. And you see what happens when they get you there. They control your energy use. They control your transportation, where you can go, what you can do, and everything. And they control your food supply. And,
exactly.
and one of the really interesting things that I've learned as I've watched all of this, you've heard them talk about, well, we're all going to eat bugs. Have you met one single person who said, yep, I'm going to do that? They're all saying, no, I'm not going to eat any bugs. But the way they're moving to control the economy is that you've got, as Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum said, only a few corporations will thrive under their Great Reset. Which few corporations are those? The very few that will go along with everything and control everything. So your marketplace is going to be what they produce. And if they're not producing any other food, then you've got no other choice. Here's all you've got, what we're giving you. One of the things they're calling for is during a year, you could only buy, under the Great Reset, 3 new outfits a year, because other than that is a waste of the environment. Well, you say, that's not true. I'm going to buy what I want. Not if it's not available. This is how they intend to control our lives with all of this crazy stuff that we're all saying, no way. But that's their intention.
And you're right. One of the things about America is that we're used to having choices, and the system is slowly taking away those choices. Say, for instance, incandescent light bulbs. We don't have those anymore. Mm-hmm. Gas stoves, they got a war on gas stoves now. They want to go all electric. I like to have choices. So if my power goes out, I can still cook food on my gas stove. If I had all electric, the power grid goes down, I can't heat anything unless I go back to my Boy Scout skills and make a fire out in the yard or something.
Well, that'll be an environmental violation too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it causes environmental problems.
But no, we are. As a nation, that's how we've been. We have choices, and those choices are being determined by the manufacturer, the establishment. Yeah, absolutely. Even down the clothing and the food. Maybe, I don't know if anybody noticed, a lot of the food that we buy doesn't taste like it used to. And actually, some of it'll make you ill, make you sick, your stomach or something. And I don't recall as a kid, any of us getting sick on the food like that.
Yeah, you're right. I love grits. I'm a city boy, but my folks came from like the South, who moved up north. But it doesn't taste the same anymore. So I stopped eating the grits. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't have the same taste.
I hope you're not doing instant grits. Oh, please tell me you're not doing instant grits. Oh, my goodness. No. But see, I'm someone that grew up where we didn't have a lot of money. You cooked. You actually made your own meal. You didn't buy something in the store, throw it in the oven, and then serve it to everyone. And so I'm accustomed to good home cooking. I don't know about you guys, but Thanksgiving, I spent a day and a half cooking.
Oh, no. Growing up, everything was made from everything was made out from the cat. My mom and my grandmothers and my aunts, everybody. It was all home done.
From scratch. That's what we call it, from scratch.
Yep. And being half Italian, I have to make my own pasta sauce. I'm sorry. I can't. I may keep a jar in my cupboard for emergencies, but that's for extreme emergencies. But my back refrigerator, I'll have jars of all different stuff, picklings, jellies, soups, sauces, vegetables. So I would prefer, but this is what we're not teaching our kids anymore. Not only are we getting away from our founding documents, teaching them what our nation was founded upon, but we're losing a large part of our history of being self-reliant. And that's
Oh,
what we need
absolutely.
to do. We have become a disposable society. If it can't be done in 40 characters or less, they're not going to listen to it. That's why people like us are fighting to bring America back to its roots. And in 2 years, we have our 250th anniversary. So, hey, I've lived to see the 200th and the 250th. Matter of fact, I have to admit, Tom, 1 month after, actually on July 4th, 1976, I had my first editorial in a New York tri-state newspaper.
Bicentennial.
Yep, it was a bicentennial editorial, and it was top of the fold. And here I was, a kid straight out of high school, 1 month out of high school.
Oh, wow.
So I've been fighting a long fight here. So there's not a not a liberal or Democratic gene in my makeup. I was born this way. Well, I'm looking down. We've got about 10 minutes left. Matt, can people find a website for you or somewhere that they can go and find you online?
I have a Facebook page for my book, and it's the title of the book, The Founding Fathers, What Did They Really Say? That's my Facebook page. I don't have a website for it yet, but they can buy this book on Amazon. Actually, if you just do a Google search, there's some other online sellers that are selling it as well, but the main retailer is Amazon for it. And there's also a Kindle copy as well.
Good. Excellent. So that way they can just leave it on their phone, and if you need to reference it, they can. So, Matt, I thank you for joining us. And I know you got to run to take care of a family member, and I appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Hopefully we can talk again soon. Nice to meet everybody.
It's a pleasure. God bless.
Thank you.
Tom,
I hope so. Have a good weekend.
All right.
You too.
Thank you.
And Tom, we've known each other for a couple of years, I should say. You're right. But your latest book is Sustainable, the War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals. And you go back to the Activist Handbook, Agenda 21. Oh, I meant to tell you that when Newt Gingrich was running for president, and I think that was about, 12 people in the field at the time? He came down here to South Carolina, and the 3 Tea Parties we had active at the time, we hosted him in a huge rally. We schooled Newt Gingrich on Agenda 21. Mm-hmm. It was myself and the other 2 Tea Party leaders, sat him down as we were eating just before going to the rally. We sat all together with him, and we taught him about Agenda 21.
I'll tell you something interesting. When he was running for president, and it must have been your group. They kept, everywhere he went to speak, they kept saying, "What about Agenda 21?" And somebody finally told him to call me. And one day the phone rang, and he did. And I went through, and he said, "That's the best explanation I've ever heard of it." And the next debate, he brought it up in the debate. So it must have been your people that prompted him to do that.
Well, I do have a funny story to tell you about Newt Gingrich, because when we had the rally, my late husband had made a stage out of a 5x8 pull trailer. And he didn't anchor it down on the one end that you should have left the hitch onto the car. He didn't anchor it properly. And Newt is not a small man. So he's climbing up on the stage, and the press is rushing the stage at the same time. Oh. And it's not anchored. So the whole thing started to tip upward, and I just see Newt Gingrich getting ready to go flying off the stage. Oh. So the 3 of us jumped on the other end that should have been anchored down and sat on during the whole time he spoke. But when the press comes rushing up to the stage, I, in my best NYPD voice, shouted to the press, "Get off the stage!" loud enough that Newt turned around, his mouth wide open, his eyes like this. Like, that voice came out of that little girl. So, yeah, that's my story with Newt Gingrich. I got a one-on-one interview with him for about, they said, "We'll give you only about 3 to 5 minutes." For more than 10 minutes, he sat with me one-on-one while the press with their face was pressed against the restaurant window, wondering who he was talking to one-on-one. So, Tom, it has been a pleasure. I mean, I had a whole list of stuff to talk with you about, but it just went right out the window. I told you, we just do this off the top of our head.
Yeah, we'll get you back on. We'll get you back
But
on.
we
Sure.
definitely will. And God bless you for the hard work you do. And I'm telling people, go to AmericanPolicy.org and check you out and get your books.
Absolutely. And by the way, Sustainable, I actually wrote it in 2017, but just a few months ago, I recorded it for audio. And I was surprised by how much it is still right on time for everything that's happening. So that my book, Sustainable, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals, will tell you everything you need to know about what we're facing here.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
Definitely have to get that. Or you can send me a signed copy.
I would do that. Absolutely. I'll do that.
I weasel. All the books behind me are from interviews I've done over all these years. I mean, next year will be 15 years going.
Very
Holy
good.
cow.
Very good. We need
All
you.
right.
All right.
Well, Tom, thank you. And we'll be speaking very soon.
Thank you.
You
Appreciate
take
it. All right.
God
Take
bless.
care.
All right. Check
Bye-bye.
out Tom DeWeese at AmericanPolicy.org. We're down to our last few minutes here, Curtis. We'll be back next week with Mark Tapscott, and we have someone else joining him. Let me just pull up my calendar while we're doing this to see who our other guest is. The next week is the 6th, and Kevin Scholl should be with us also. So Hi, Mark Thompson? I got to check this out.
Who's that?
I don't know. We'll find out. But usually Mark Tapscott is in on that slot. Want to thank everyone for joining us, all our friends out there in the chat room, and that were joining us also on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere else. We will also be up on Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio is closing down. January will be their last month in operation. From there on, they're moving their stuff over to Spreaker. I don't know if I'm up on Spreaker or not. I don't know. I might be, probably. But that's all we got for now. And until then, I hope everyone had a great and healthy and safe Thanksgiving holiday. Black Friday is today. Watch out those stores. So until then, until next week, we say good night and God bless.
Good night. Take care.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Mourn for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me and you to see the truth behind their eyes. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. and we still believe in God we trust. The freedom our forefathers granted us, we know it's not too late to save America. Save America. Let's save America. Together we can save America.